Hello and welcome to my final presentation. My paper was on Alaska Native education and how to improve the quality of education for Alaska Native students. I am Melody Braden for Anthropology 242, Native Cultures of Alaska. Why did I choose this area of research? Alaska Native students graduate high school at an alarmingly low rate. The issue of Alaska Native education standards needs to be addressed. This research presentation assesses reasons that Alaska education system is failing Native students. And the purpose of this research is to highlight problems facing Alaska Native students and to find solutions for helping improve the quality of education for Alaska Native children. Alaska needs more Alaska Native teachers. About 25% of Alaska school-aged children are Alaska Native, yet less than 5% of teachers are Alaska Native. Non-Native teachers need to be trained to teach in a more holistic way that's culturally relevant. And teachers need to help make the curriculum more relevant to Indigenous students and to all of their students. And most importantly, educators need to be taught to value traditional ways of knowing and doing and to help Alaska Native students feel culturally empowered. Alaska Native people have a long history of education. Before colonialism, Alaska Native people had ways of teaching young people. After colonialism, many people experienced trauma through the education system. Children were taken away and placed in boarding schools, and there was forced education and forced assimilation, which led to a loss of history, culture, and roots. People were taught to devalue their own way of thinking and doing and their cultural practices for education. The education system changed people from producers into consumers and changed their way of life. They were taught to leave behind traditional ways of living. They learned about new kinds of houses, tools, and language. And in the process of education, there was a loss of values, tradition, and self-sufficiency. Teacher recruitment. There is a demand for more Alaska Native teachers, especially in rural communities. The missing link between education and Alaska Native communities is the lack of access to Alaska Native teachers. I think it's important for Alaska Native youth to have teachers who are also Native. And not just for Alaska Native youth, I believe that teachers bring their own unique experiences and way of thinking to the classroom, and that makes the education system richer. And having more Alaska Native teachers would improve the richness not only for Alaska Native students, but for all of Alaska's students. Also, there's conflict between rural schools that are predominantly Indigenous and the predominantly Eurocentric school system. And some researchers suggest the control of Indigenous schools and curriculum development should be placed in the hands of Indigenous people. Another important thing to consider is teacher training. Most teachers of Alaska Native school students are not Native. And there is a need for more Alaska Native teachers. Schools and universities need to take a more aggressive approach to recruiting Alaska Native teachers. With so few Alaska Native teachers, there needs to be more training for non-Native teachers. Teacher colleges and preparation schools need to help teachers develop skills to work with Native children. And teachers need to be trained to be culturally sensitive, as well as ways to increase students' cultural pride. In order for non-Native teachers to be successful with working with Native populations, teachers need to be trained in some spirituality of local people. Basically, teachers need to understand the student population that they're teaching. For many people, for many Alaska Native people, their own experience with education was not a positive one. And I believe that communities still remember the poor treatment that historically Alaska Native children have suffered through. New teachers coming into a village setting need to understand that they might not be seen as somebody who's doing good for the children of the community, and might not be seen as somebody who has the best intentions of these children. In order to overcome community biases toward education, new teachers need to be prepared to work alongside communities and community members. Community ties in Alaska Native communities are especially important, and student-teacher programs need to prepare new teachers to value the collective wisdom of the community. Non-Native teachers don't need to create the Native identity, but they need to be prepared to honor traditional ways of knowing and doing. Teachers need to be prepared to teach in a holistic way. Place-based education is especially important for Alaska Native students and for all students. Students need to be aware of their surroundings, and they should be taught that people share the earth with other inhabitants. Teachers need to teach ecology and they need to be taught how to talk about ecology ideas that will make the world a better, more beautiful place, not just develop, but ecology projects that will make the world work better together. There also needs to be a value of interconnections. Spirituality is a large part of Alaska Native learning. And in order for non-Native teachers to successfully work with Indigenous students, new teachers need to be trained in some spiritual traditions of local people. Teachers should be sensitive to traditions and try to be aware of already established ways of learning and doing. Each community's most valuable resource is their people, and it's important for teachers to be prepared to invite people into the classroom, whether it's elders or community leaders. But it's important that the education is seen as a whole community endeavor. Gardening is another area that students can learn in a holistic way. And this is a really great place to have community input. Effective pedagogy and curriculum. So there are 4 main ways to improve pedagogy and curriculum. Values of Native people need to be addressed in the curriculum, including spirituality. And teachers need to include worldviews and interconnections among people that also fit well with Alaska Native cultural identity. And then using the language of the Indigenous group can have power that connects students with their cultural background, and it can also lead to an increased sense of pride in their cultural identity. And then getting the students outside, having them be active, having people learn in a place-based environment, outdoors, wherever it's possible. And then school should be taught in a more holistic way. It should not be divided into subjects, but bringing all subjects into lessons. Creating cultural pride is also important to build student self-esteem and self-worth, which affects all aspects of people's lives in a positive way. Teachers of Native students have the unique opportunity to help children realize the value of their culture and of themselves. In order to build pride and a sense of cultural belonging, each school should contain reminders of cultural value and pride. Artifacts, photos, and posters of Indigenous groups makes students feel like they belong and increases cultural pride. As I mentioned before, another way to increase pride is through teaching of traditional languages. Through learning a student's mother tongue, they feel more connected to their cultural identity and a connectedness to history, tradition, and to art. In conclusion, Alaska Native education needs to be addressed at the statewide level. Education for Alaska Native students can be improved in 4 ways: by recruiting Alaska Native teachers, by training non-Native teachers, by creating culturally relevant curriculum and pedagogy, and increasing students' cultural pride and self-worth. Also, by making changes to these 4 areas, Alaska youth can grow and be successful at even higher levels. Thank you for listening to this presentation. All of the photos that I used are my own.